So we've all worked with a lot of YouTubers across many different niches for a couple of years by now. And I was wondering, what are the traits that you've seen that the successful ones have in common? So those who are both successful, like by external metrics, so getting a lot of views, their channel is growing, and also successful when you think about how happy they seem in life and in their creative endeavors. So, Jamie, to put you on the spot, what is like the first trait you would bring up if someone asked this question?
Yeah, so I've worked with a few different YouTubers who basically have their YouTube channel as a business, but they got this through the YouTube being the vehicle. And then I've worked with a number of entrepreneurs who had a business, and then they used the YouTube channel to promote that business. But one of the characteristics that I see through both of them is that they are action biased. So they tend to just lean into speed and kind of just say, let's do it and we'll figure it out later on, or we'll test those things and we'll measure it and then decide upon which was the correct title, the correct thumbnail, which is the best idea. They try not to get stuck in this overthinking and planning process. They tend to just go. And that is what I believe leads to quite a number of different things happening. I think the first is that their YouTube videos get better faster than those who aren't action-based, biased, because they just tend to upload one video a month because they spend more time thinking about it, scripting it, what's the title, what's the thumbnail. Whereas these guys tend to be like, let's just put out 3 videos over the course of, the next 10 days, and we'll learn from it. Me and the team will improve. And because of that, the videos actually get better over the course of a year, which actually results in them getting more views, more subscribers, more business. I think that is just one of the things that in all areas of life is better if you're action biased, because you shorten that feedback loop, and you manage to improve your content at a rapid pace. So I feel like that's something I've noticed with a lot of different YouTubers now.
I'm curious, because I think I see that to an extent with the people that you're talking about, and the people that I work with, I can see that as well. But I wonder whether there is a kind of diminishing returns element to that approach, because I think there are some people that I've worked with where, and I specifically mean over time, like as their channels run for longer and longer and they get more experience. Because I've definitely worked with, like I see in who you're describing, I see Ali, who we've all worked with, and I completely understand where you're coming from with that. But then I think particularly some of the more like entertainment focused channels, while maybe the ideation side of things can have that kind of action bias mindset, I then see things slow down a lot when it then comes to the production and the editing and kind of making those final tweaks, where sometimes a video will get like we'll get maybe 80% of the way there in the first couple of days, but then there's this really long tail where the pace slows right down, and actually and this is when we're like into the millions of subscribers potentially, they then really slow down and kind of focus on detail. And I wonder whether, so I know this is like just basically passing on the same question or passing it back even, but I wonder if you've witnessed that happening as well with the people you've worked with.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Like you say, action biased is great up until a certain point. I think if you're a beginner YouTuber or you're an entrepreneur that's successful in one area of life, but you want to start a YouTube channel, being action biased allows you, like I said, to close that feedback loop, improve your content quite rapidly. But if you stay within that method of thinking and being very action biased, you can get to the point where you then don't strategize. You don't slow down to plan the next 5 moves, and the content as a result can suffer. And you see this in like the bell curve of like you speed up and then you kind of like slow down, and it kind of just becomes a bit messy. And I do see that, and that is a downside. But I would say that there is a degree to which getting a video out is better than not putting a video out at all, or it just kind of always stays in the editing process or in the scripting process. And so it's like one of those things which is typical on YouTube, where one piece of advice or one thing that you like, one characteristic that you see in one YouTuber doesn't always apply to another YouTube channel. And I think a lot of people try and do that. Like there are some YouTubers where being action biased, if you're a news YouTube channel, for example, is massively advantageous, because you're going to get that content out faster than other news YouTube channels and you reap all of the rewards. But as you say, if you're an entertainment channel that's doing like a prank video, right, or a gaming video, speeding through that process might not actually result in the best YouTube video. And taking a few steps back to kind of analyze the video edit or the script, or what are we actually trying to accomplish in this video, and having some patience probably is the better thing to do. And then I guess, like, even if you go outside of like YouTube, just into like the world of social media and live streaming, that is very action biased. Like there is no scripting, ideating, editing there. You're live. So I think that's why we see a lot of these like streamers on Kick now who go out and basically just cause havoc in neighborhoods and just basically harass civilians just for,
civilians.
Yeah, well, it is like that. These people, I saw one the other day where like a guy just goes on and starts eating the food of someone who was sat outside eating at a restaurant. And I was just like, what? Like, that's crazy. But because you can, I think when you're like a teenager, you want to live stream and you're very action biased, you can potentially do stupid things like that for the views. And that's the downside of things like live streaming over something like, YouTube video.
To your point about post-production, George, like I've seen as well that things slow down. I think on the one hand, successful creators tend to be action biased, where they're like, why don't we film the video tomorrow instead of in a week's time? Why don't we take that earlier slot, push? And then also in post-production, I think the things that help are, yes, this edit is fine. These would be my tweaks for next time, but for now it's good. And also just enforcing that earlier mentality in the edit. So like, obviously not driving people to be working crazy hours, but saying, maybe let's not do so many motion graphics. Let's like get it done faster. Let's get it out quicker. Yeah, I agree with that. So that's action bias, number one. Number two, George, any other traits that come to mind?
Yeah, I think certainly the people that I've worked with that are doing the best, and the thing that I find a lot of people are struggling with and are therefore seeing issues with their kind of channel growth is having a kind of purpose-driven mindset. Even if you haven't figured out exactly what that purpose is, such that you could write it down on a piece of paper, having some goal behind what you're doing often just makes every kind of stage of the process easier, because if you know vaguely what it is you're trying to achieve, either for yourself or for your audience, it just makes it so much easier to ideate, to think of 10, 20 different ideas that you would like to potentially make that serve that wider purpose. And yeah, I think just generally having some kind of focus in any situation just helps that. So I think, for examples with so Ed Film Booth, his second channel, Creator Booth, he had a tremendous deal of focus when starting that channel, because it was like, okay, I now know that I've done the kind of YouTube tips thing, but now I have this really specific focus where I want to help creators monetize effectively with a smaller audience. And you can now see a lot of the tangential things that come from that YouTube channel, like his kind of communities and things like that, are focused on that kind of goal. And I found that kind of that early purpose made it much clearer for me coming in as somebody who was helping write some of the early scripts for that channel. It made it much easier to pass that on and distill that to someone else who you're working with. But I wonder, is there, maybe if you've got counterexamples where there isn't so much of a purpose, that could be interesting. But I'm curious, Jamie, whether you've had anything like that. Oh, sorry, or Gwilym, anyone.
Well, my initial thought is that even if the content itself doesn't have an explicit purpose, it's enough if the person has a purpose in their life that they're documenting. So if someone is like, my purpose in life is to travel around Europe in a camper van, looking at the most sort of living my best life, and I'm documenting that. That's not a purpose that's viewer focused, but it's more focused on themselves, but that's still enough to make it compelling.
Mm. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, so that's it. Even if it's not designed for the viewer, I suppose then you're viewing it more as just entertainment and something that you can follow around. And I think that's what I found with some people in my community that I'm have seen them posting their videos for me and the community to review and whatever else. It's like, it's very clear sometimes, I guess it comes down sort of to an audience avatar type thing, but just when they don't know exactly what they're doing it for. And I think this is something that I get concerned about when you see heavily AI generated videos, whether that, goes right down to the script, where you can usually very much tell when people are just kind of trying to create cash cows. It's like, what is the purpose of this? If the purpose is purely to drive money for yourself, obviously that's always going to be a factor for a lot of people who are starting YouTube, is that maybe this could become a job for me one day, or soon even. Maybe you're trying to get there soon. But if that's the only goal and there's nothing that kind of lies underneath it, then I think you're playing more of a finite game, because that motivation to do what you're doing will start to die off. And at least if you have a brain like mine, you start to feel kind of icky about like, what am I actually why am I trying to make people watch this? What am I actually achieving by doing this? So that's my thoughts.
One thing that I think a lot of people would expect creators to be, that they're not necessarily, is very outgoing and personable in person. Like this is not a dig, but it's more that when I meet creators and when you see them in interviews, etc., let's say like Mr. Beast, Jessa, I think Ali is like this to some extent. They're a lot more introverted than you might expect, and so I think it's just useful to flag that you don't have to be extroverted to make it on YouTube. And in fact, there seems to be a bit of a pattern. I think Colin and Samir were noting it when they were interviewing Jessa. They were like, the shy kid at school who doesn't talk that much, who is secretly making YouTube videos at home that explode. And Mr. Who's the Boss fits this template where being comfortable talking on camera is different to being comfortable talking to human beings.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, like, I definitely myself resonate with that whole analogy of like, there's a kid at home who's shy but makes videos. Like that was me when I was a teenager, and I was terrified to talk on video. But I think you do become a little bit more confident with it. But I've worked with different YouTubers now who are both way introverted and then completely on the other side, who are just so energetic, always outgoing, love to talk to people. I think that like that is a good thing to recognize, is that there is this spectrum of individuals who just kind of feel like they want to make a YouTube video. I think a lot of people who are typically introverted, for a YouTube channel, it's way easier for them to address a million people, because they have control of the edit. They can take as long as they want. They can mess up and edit out those takes. Whereas if you put them on stage in front of, even just like 100 people, even like 30 people, that would be enough where they would be crippled by it and they'd be too anxious. So I think YouTube is a great way of being able to speak to loads of people. And I think that is something where it's not necessarily a characteristic trait of why you succeed or fail on YouTube, but I think that it allows those individuals to actually be seen on YouTube and have success, where typically, pre-YouTube, if you had to, be on stage or be an actor or anything like that and work with loads of other people, you probably wouldn't get your ideas, your thoughts, or your personality out there in a way. They probably would be more like an author, right? Like just by your own, writing your own book and getting your thoughts out that way. I definitely think that it's an interesting kind of take. Like just another characteristic trait that I've noticed in a lot of individuals, which kind of touches on that to an extent, is just like a lack of certain level of fear, or this fear of judgment. I think that also pairs very well with that being action biased, of not really thinking about it too much, not getting caught up in your emotions and your thoughts, just kind of being like, what's the worst that can happen? Screw it, let's do it. And kind of just putting stuff out there, not wondering if what someone's going to judge on that tweet or that YouTube video, or is that face that I'm pulling in that thumbnail a bit too much? They just tend to be very okay with that. And I think that even, filters down from not just their behavior, but all the way down to even like the financial side of things, of not having this scarcity and fear of losing money, but kind of just being like, yeah, let's see it as an experiment. Screw it, like you want this amount of money, like there you go. Let's see what happens from it. Do you see that as well? I feel like lack of fear is definitely something that is quite common.
I think that's what makes it easier to be action biased, is like, because I think a lot of people, if you take the example of, should we film next week? That'll give us more time to prepare and blah. Whereas someone who has less of that fear might just be like, what if I get the camera out and record it now? A lot of procrastination is fear driven, right? And if you take away that fear, it becomes a lot easier to just do the thing.
Yeah. One thing I found, just it's so interesting hearing you guys like talking about this, and Jamie, with your example from when you were making videos when you were younger. I remember I also had a YouTube channel when I was at school, and it started to get like a little bit of traction. I'd just been partnered with some NCN or other, I can't remember, but it was just starting to get somewhere where I was like, oh, maybe there's something that could happen with this. But the anxiety around having this stuff out there got to such a point that in the end, I just like deleted all my videos and just stopped doing it. It was partly because I needed to like focus on my exams and whatever. But I think this is particularly for anyone who's listening who is kind of maybe younger, maybe still at school or at college or whatever, or even at university. Just whenever you're constantly around people who could feasibly discover what it is you're doing and then reflect that back at you all the time. I think the difference now, like I had someone the other day, like a friend of mine, because I've started posting on LinkedIn, and it's a lot of like, it's very Twitterified, wannabe influencer type stuff that I guess doesn't really, it sticks out a bit on LinkedIn. It doesn't really seem like what most people are doing, which is like, I got a promotion and I make this much money now and whatever.
Yeah.
It's all BS, like whatever you're doing. But he was just like, yeah, I mean, like he said it felt a bit cringe or whatever. And I was just like, 10 years ago when I was at school, having that pointed out to me would have made me just think, oh, and I would have gone straight home and I would have deleted everything. Whereas now, I think it really helps when you're not surrounded by that stuff and you can just keep on being action biased, doing your thing, letting the results speak for themselves and not really worrying too much about the outside noise. That is so helpful. And then it gets to a point where, because you're then able to build up that compounding effect, when someone says, oh, it's kind of cringe what you're doing on LinkedIn, I'm like, I'll just show them what my course made this year. And I'm like, I don't give it, exactly. I don't care. Like, I really don't care.
I'm going to use that to segue right into another point, which is like having a growth mindset.
Yeah.
I think a lot of good creators have developed exactly what you're talking about, like this thick skin.
Yeah.
And they will go and seek out people who will give them, not harsh, but honest feedback. And if someone says this video was crap, they'll be like, oh, okay, tell me more. And they will want to hear. They might even search out consultants or whatever just to get more opinions. I think that's really common.
It's interesting how all three of these are like connecting, right? It's like the speaking to other people to get feedback and someone saying it's cringe. Okay, how can I improve? Is like, again, like connecting to the fear base. They're not really scared of someone telling them what they've made is bad. And then they want that feedback to go and improve it, which is action-based, And so already we're seeing how these three are starting to connect together in just this one example. And I think when you have that across 100 different things that it takes to grow a YouTube channel, that's when it adds up quite quickly. And you're seen, again, completely different by the audience. People have a pedestal that they like to put a lot of YouTubers on, but sometimes there are those things behind the scenes that you don't actually see, which are quite minimal, but do add up.
In fact, it's interesting. It's the exact mirror of the things that people say when they don't want to start a YouTube channel. So, do you want to start a YouTube channel? Oh no, I'd be too scared of putting my face out there. Maybe I'll do it, but not right now. And what if people think it's shit? That's the exact mirror opposite of, I'm just going to do the thing now. I don't care that much what people think. I wanna learn from negative feedback. So I guess it's kind of staring us right in the face, isn't it?
Yeah. That was poetic. I love that. That's a really good point.
So, Gwilym, what is another traits that you've seen in other YouTubers who are successful?
Well, one thing is, this ties in, but to the kind of feedback thing, but they want to run experiments. Every now and then you come across a channel and they're like, we want to grow. And then you look at what they've been doing and they've been doing the same thing. And it's sort of, they're coasting. And you're like, what about doing this different thing or that different thing? And then there is a kind of fear-based response of like, this is how we've always done it. We don't really want to like push out too much. We don't want to experiment too much. I think successful YouTubers are always running little experiments, even if it's like 1 in 5 videos, they do a new thing, and that's what lets them grow. Using Jesser as an example, just because I watched this interview yesterday, he was saying one of the scariest moments in his life as a kind of basketball creator was moving from just playing NBA 2K video games and streaming them to doing in-person going to basketball game content. And it's that kind of thing that I think successful creators branch out to doing.
I completely agree. And I think there are 2 opposing examples in my head that I have right now of people that I've worked with recently, where there's a channel that I'm sort of tangentially working with at the moment who they have outsourced pretty much their whole process to a creative director. And when I've asked the creator, like, oh, what would you like, how should we approach X or Y? They just say, don't ask me, ask them. And they're like entirely willing to just give. And I think this is obviously, there's a balance to be had with something like this, but they are fully willing to try something for a bit where they're like, right, I've gotten this channel to a certain point. They're doing, the channel's got multiple millions of subscribers. It's doing pretty well, but I wonder what someone else with experience in all these other fields could bring to this. And so that's being really, that's quite interesting to feel the videos shifting slightly because the creator is willing to let somebody else drive that creative direction with their experience. Contrast that with another channel that I was working with who I think, partly there was a lot of things on my end with the whole like agency thing. I wasn't putting the time into certain things as much as I should have been. And I think this client definitely felt the effects of that. But they essentially came to us saying like, yes, willing to try new things, saying that. But as the feedback we were getting on things we were doing started coming in, it essentially felt like we'd built a brand new car, and bit by bit, this person was just like hammering it back into the exact same shape of the car they already had. And by the end of it, it felt like you could have just carried on driving the car that you had. You didn't need us to build this other car just for you to smash it up. And I
love
think
a
that's
George
something
analogy.
Yeah, maybe it fell apart at the end. But yeah, I think this is something that I've definitely noticed with various people that you work with, where I think a lot of people want to feel like they're open to those sorts of changes, but it's that kind of introspection is really important for you as a creator to think like, am I actually open to this? Am I open to trying something new? Am I open to giving a certain part to somebody else? Or am I saying that, but when push comes to shove, do I just want to fit the mold again?
Yeah, I really relate to this because there's been some clients that I've worked with where they've been like super open and they just like listen and like, you're the guy who knows what he's talking about. Like, we'll listen to what you do. And like working on like a certain packaging concept, for example, that's a little bit different than what they've done in the past. They'd be like, I'm not sure, but we'll trust you. And then it performs. And then they're like way more likely to trust you going forwards. And then after like a number of videos where that's happened, it's kind of like they don't even think about it. Now they just let me do it, essentially, like come up with a packaging concept. Where I've had other clients where we want your expertise. We would like your opinion. And then it's that exact same thing that you said of like, oh, but we don't do it that way. Oh, I'm not sure. Oh, what about this? And you end up going down a path of like being, oh, it's your YouTube channel. Like if you really want to do it, we'll do it the way that you want to do it. That's fine. But then I think, well, why did you bring me in? Why did you ask for my opinion if you're not even going to really listen to it? And then it doesn't perform. And then that's happened where we then A/B test with my concept. It does perform better. And then over time, they've started to learn to trust me. But I think that, again, going back to being action biased and allowing someone to just trust them because they are a thumbnail designer, let's say, you end up like shortening that feedback loop much more and getting the results that you would like.
And even if your thumbnail underperformed compared to the original one, they would still have made the right decision in trying it out, because again, it's about running experiments, not making the right decision, and just collecting more data. Whereas there's no point in asking for other opinions and then not trying them out.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of like entrepreneurs who have the solopreneurship following that's kind of been building up over the last few years of like, I'm just an entrepreneur. I don't want team members. I don't want to manage people. It's just me. And I think there are a lot of YouTubers out there who fit that mold, kind of like your Casey Neistat of like, I have to edit every single video. I don't want to outsource that to anyone else. I want to do all of the thumbnails, and their content is better for it. But then you also have the characteristics, I think, of the YouTuber who sees YouTube as a business and says, okay, I need to be able to let go of the control of certain areas of this ship that I'm building, right? Like if this is my team, I need to trust the video editor knowing what they're doing, the thumbnail designer knows what they're doing, and I'm just like orchestrating conducting this whole orchestra, I should say. That I think is like way better when a YouTuber fits into one of those two extremes. I think when you get someone who's kind of in the middle, that's where it gets a bit messy. And like I say, with my previous story of like, I've worked with clients who are in the middle, but they then tend to lean towards listening to what I say. They fall more towards the team building aspect, and the YouTube channel is better for it. But if that doesn't happen, I think those who kind of stay in that middle area for an extended period of time actually get frustrated by YouTube, more likely to give up, to maybe have one bad experience with a thumbnail designer, let's say, because I've heard these stories before of people outsourcing, it didn't really go that well, and then they give up. When actually we do know that outsourcing is a very good thing to do. But it comes back to what's your expectations really as a YouTuber, and do you have that open-mindedness and experimentation mindset towards growth? Because that really can, unlock a whole new level to the YouTube game if you see it more like a business and you're okay with letting go of control of these different areas of content creation.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that, or maybe putting in a few caveats about this. One of which is we have a bias towards creators who work with teams, because obviously those are the ones we tend to work with. We're not working with one-man bands, and so there are other types of success that we are less familiar with just because we haven't had as much exposure to it. There's also survivorship bias, where there may well be some people out there who are doing all of these things but are failing to get success because of, I don't know, an unrelated factor. Maybe just like their ideation isn't that good, for example. And yet there will always be a bunch of exceptions to any list like this, where someone could say, what about, Casey Neistat? Like, he doesn't do X, Y, Z, and that's all true. But I do think that all the things you've listed are, I feel it in my gut that it is correlated to success from what I've seen.
Just off the back of what you were saying, that reminded me, I think John Ushai did a post recently. So he used to work at YouTube and is now, I guess, like a creator in his own right. And he talks about this thing called the production paradox, where, it speaks to what you were saying, Gwilym, about the survivorship bias thing, but specifically the things that don't matter as much once you're well established really, really could matter at the start. So I think of someone like Cody Ko, who just sits in front of a camera, reacts to like viral Karen memes, and doesn't even really bother centering himself on the camera. He's in a messy garage, and he can just do that now because he's built up that kind of, the kudos that he has. Casey Neistat is a different example, I guess, because like his editing is so good, and the way he characterizes the cities that he's in, he's obviously very, very talented as a videographer and a filmmaker as well. But there's still that sense of like, if just some randomer was, like the titles and thumbnails that Casey has, if some randomer did that, like you wouldn't often think to click it, but he's built up those kind of idiosyncrasy credits over his, his time. And that, I think I stole that from something else as well, maybe Originals by Adam Grant, I can't remember. But yeah, it's just interesting to note, like you say, survivorship bias, that production paradox that, that definitely exists, that you shouldn't always be looking to model yourself on the people that you see succeeding. But it is interesting definitely to get these insights into what the people are like and what they prioritize, that we've spoken about today, when they're building up their channels.
I would say as well that just before we wrap this episode up, that if you are a new YouTuber and you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I don't have that characteristic, I'm not gonna make it because I'm not action biased, or I'm not very open-minded. I don't think of growth in these ways. Like, all of this stuff is definitely learnable, and you can change who you are. Like we said before, there are people who are not those things who still had success. But if you can train yourself to be more action biased and not get stuck in that planning phase for when you want to get going on YouTube, like, that can be done. And again, like, just going back to not having like a fixed mindset, have a growth mindset, believe you can change. And I actually find that the more videos you try and make and upload, the more you will naturally just tend to learn those things, these values that we're saying. I think a lot of the people who have those characteristics and personality traits pick them up over time, and certainly didn't have that when they first got going. And so if it's something that you want to do, you will just naturally have to be patient and learn as you go. And I think one day you'll then look back and be like, oh, wow, I was a completely different person, and I had to become this new identity essentially to be able to be a successful YouTuber. But these things just don't happen overnight. And so, yeah, my advice would be like, don't frustrate yourself if, all of a sudden you keep finding that you default to planning and to organization rather than trying to be more action based when you're, uploading your first YouTube video.
And also, like, there's huge value in being different to other people. That's one of the things that will help you stick out on YouTube is, no one else cares about this thing, but I really care about whatever it is, and I'm just going to make videos about it anyway. And lo and behold, maybe the audience will come.
Right, thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the podcast. If you are enjoying making it, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen or watch. And if you would like to listen to another episode where we talk about 3 channels that are doing really, really well at the moment and for very different reasons, make sure to check out this next episode right here.